Hello, parents and teachers who may be watching. Welcome to Creating Math Ahas for Parents. I'm Dr. Sandy Atkins Sandy. I'd like to start by welcoming our new subscribers. Thank you so much for doing that. And if you haven't yet, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. In this video, I'd like to look at telling time on analog clocks. And we'll look at all that information and all of the understandings that occur with telling time. And you may notice that this clock is missing some of the hands, and that's going to be purposeful. And I hope it will make sense as we continue along. So let's get started and think about what is involved in telling time. Now, one thing I'd like you to notice, I don't know if you can see it that well in here, but a clock is a number line that wraps on itself. I've made a number line here. And you can see that my number line, 12 for 1, 12, and it goes back to 12. I want you to think about if it's a number line that wraps on itself, when the hand is pointing here, the hour hand, we're halfway between, or a quarter of a way. That those numbers on the clock are showing hours that have passed, but also multiples of 5 minutes. So we have both things going on here. So one thing we want to help the children, your children, understand is that it's a number line that wraps on itself. Once you get to 12 again, you start over. Now, the other thing just to think about with this clock is there's more to telling time than just knowing longhand, shorthand, and where they're pointed. And this one has the second hand also. So there's a little bit more to it, but there's also a lot of math involved here in that because it's a circle, this is 360 degrees. If we divide it into 12 sections, each of those angles that you can see here between the 12 and the 1, formed by 12 and 1, formed by 1 and 2, 2 and 3, each 30 degrees, so that we can go around 30 degrees. These 3 sets of 30 degrees give us that 90-degree angle. So within the clock, there's a lot of geometry that's taking place because it is a circular model. Now, as I said, there's more to telling time than just longhand, shorthand, and where they're pointing. One thing that we want your child to understand is what the clock measures. Okay, so we've got, let's see if I can get some light off of that a little. We've got an hour hand, right? So we want your children to understand it's measuring a unit of time. And we want them to also understand that that unit of time it's measuring, we want to know the relationship between measuring in hours, measuring in minutes, measuring in seconds. Now, one thing you may see in some classrooms is they have an hour hand only clock. And you may see that I've bought several of these clocks relatively cheap, and I've just removed different hands. Now, as they're looking at this hour hand, what we want to get a sense of is how long does it take to go from 3 to 4 o'clock? That's that 1 hour. We also want them, they could tell time to the half hour, because when we're halfway between 4 and 5, think of that number line. You're at 4:30. You're at 5 o'clock, halfway between, we're at 5:30 and 6 o'clock. And for some of your children, they could even probably tell time to the nearest quarter hour just using an hour hand only clock. So you may see a clock like this in the classroom. It actually has the battery in it. It would be a working clock, and they start to just think about how long is an hour and starting to tell time with an hour hand only clock. Consider doing that at home too. Have some fun with it and give them a sense of how long an hour is and that clock halfway between. Now, I've been using a lot of fraction terminology talking so far, right? And you can see I have a minute hand only clock. And with your children, let's see where I put my marker here. With your children, we would want them to also think about that minute hand only, looking at what's happening there. Now, I'm going to draw a line from the center up to 12. And it's really helpful when we start to learn about time if your children have already done some work with fractions. Because see, once I understand fractions, let's see if I can get this to turn now. See, once that line's drawn in there, does half become a little bit more apparent? A quarter, right? So we're a quarter past, and you can see it's 1/4 of the circle. And if your children have had some fraction work and played around with fourths and halves, and then we have the quarter till, 3/4 past. We typically don't use that, but a quarter till. You see, fraction work helps when we're looking at quarter past, half past, quarter till, and then on the hour. So it's also a sequencing thing, helps us with telling time, okay? So we tell time with an hour hand only clock, we tell time with a minute hand only clock, and we can also help your children once the minute hand has hit the 6, the half pass, then see, we can look at where is the hour hand. If it's been going, it will be halfway between two numbers. So again, we buy some cheap clocks, we remove some of the hands, we let them get a sense of half, quarter, quarter till, looking at also where the hour hand is. So we get a sense of how long a minute is, how long an hour is, and then the relationship between the two. So that eventually they see that when that minute hand makes a full, right, when it travels the full way around that clock, right, we've got that full revolution. This would have gone between the two numbers. That will make that hour. Now, the other one, and you may guess what's coming, right, is I also have a clock. This was the one you saw on the title page for the session. And you notice this one, I do have the battery and it's working. And one thing we do with the children with this one is just have them look at that second hand and notice the relationship of what's happening between the second hand making one revolution and the minute hand. So they start to notice that when the second hand has gone all the way around the clock, the minute hand has moved one space. Goes all the way around the clock, the minute hand has moved another space. So we get that relationship. So when it comes to telling time on an analog clock, remember there's a lot of geometry involved. We have that opportunity to make those connections as your children get older. But what we want them to understand is when they see this clock, they know that there's a relationship between those hands. That every time that second hand makes a revolution, the minute hand moves a space. Every time the minute hand makes a revolution, the hour hand has shifted numbers. And then they can also start to see that we've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. They get to see those numbers again as representing two things: hours that have passed and multiples of 5 minutes that have passed. So that as they're starting to tell time, it's not just the length of the hands, but they understand the unit of time that they're measuring. I hope this video has helped explain a few things that you could do. You might want to invest in some cheap clocks and play around with having your children tell time with the hour hand only, with a minute hand only, and start to look at the fractional relationships before we bring it all together. Again, if you found this useful, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up, share it with others. Again, please consider subscribing to the channel. It is free. And again, turn on that notifications bell so you know when other videos are coming. Thanks so much for taking time to watch this video.